A little short. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, get my setup here. Thank you for coming. This is my third time speaking here, so I appreciate anyone who's seen me speak today before. This is a different topic. I'm here to talk about roadside program and how we can, well, we'll just get into it. If you're not familiar with our organization, we are the Florida Wildflower Foundation. Our mission is to protect, connect, and expand native wildflower habitat, and we do that through education, research, planting, and conservation programs. We are celebrating 25 years this year. We are really excited to um, share the growth that we've been experiencing. Much of that is due to this wonderful license plate. Um, this is basically, I'm going to talk to you about roadsides today, but we wouldn't be talking about roadsides if it weren't for this license plate. This was created 26 years ago. We celebrated its birthday last year to support the Department of Transportation's Roadside Wildflower Program. That's kind of what our organization was built out of. And of course, we've grown significantly over the years and expanded the programs that we do. But our foundation lies in supporting naturally occurring roadside wildflowers. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But we have, again, had this tag since 2000. It's brought in over $6 million in donations. If you have the tag, thank you. You're entitled to a membership with our organization just by having it. If you don't have the tag but would like to get it, you can go on our website. You don't have to go to the DMV. You can actually just fill out a form, and the Department of Highway, Motor Vehicles, and Safety will take care of it for you. So anyway. If you do have the plate, let us know so we can get you in our database and make sure that you have those membership benefits. So I'm here to talk about roadsides, specifically roadside wildflowers. So what we're going to talk about is why this matters. So what, why do we care about native plants? Again, we're talking mostly about naturally occurring wildflowers, but why these are important. Then we will do a little bit about the value of roadsides, why roadsides make good habitat. I'll tell you about our program and what we do, and then I'll also talk a little bit about what you can do to help get involved in this. So first, let's talk a little bit about Florida. We are one of the most biodiverse states in the country. That means that we have a lot of different plants, things that don't occur anywhere else. We have over 3,200 species that are native to Florida. Many of those are endemic. That means they occur nowhere else in the world but here. We have a lot of threatened and endangered species. We have a lot of ancient species, more families, many more plant families than other states. So we are really botanically diverse, and that's just plants. I'm not even talking about the animals and the wildlife that we have. But we are a very botanically diverse state. So this is really important to what makes us unique, right? Florida is not like any other state in the country. When you think about the habitats and the ecosystems that we have here, the plants and animals as well. But we're also one of the fastest growing states. We are the third most populous state behind California and Texas. That is variable every day, but we get about 1,000 to 1,200 people moving here every single day. And if you've seen my talks, you've heard me say this. I'm just like blown away every time I say that, to think that this is still occurring, that this many people are moving here to Florida. And so to accommodate that, we have to develop, right? We have to create roads and schools and houses and all the infrastructure that's needed to support all the people that are moving here. And so how are we doing that? We're developing our natural areas. All of that unique plant habitat that I just mentioned, we are developing that to build our roads, our schools, our homes, and all of that. So we're losing that diversity that makes us so unique and so valuable ecologically. And with that, we're also losing the habitat that our pollinators and our wildlife depend on. So, and what we know from researchers like Doug Tallamy, and if you don't know Doug, look him up. He's done a lot of research on the importance of native plants specifically. But what we've learned is that we can't sustain our wildlife with what we've got left. So we once had these vast areas of natural lands, of habitat, and we're shrinking them, and they're becoming smaller and isolated, like small islands of natural habitat, now surrounded by these ever-increasing hardscapes, our built environment. And that's not sustainable. Our pollinators, our wildlife need bigger areas of natural lands, but we don't have the ability to, we're not going to take out our development, right? But they also need connectivity. They need to be able to get from one natural area to another. And so the smaller that these areas become, the more isolated they become, the less valuable they are, the less functional they are to the wildlife and the pollinators that we rely on. And we do rely on pollinators. Pollinators are food for many other animals. Insects are a huge food source for many of our wildlife, especially our birds, our smaller wildlife that rely on insects for their sustenance. But our pollinators also provide ecosystem services. They actually perform services that make our ecosystems function and that make these areas livable for us too. They provide natural pest control. Our native insects, our native pollinators can actually keep the bad bugs at bay in some cases. They also provide nutrient recycling. Our flies, our beetles, our ground-dwelling insects too will actually help break down dying, decaying material and turn it into soil. So they're really performing a lot of jobs that we can't do. Nature has to make that happen. We can't replicate that. And then, of course, the biggest, most important ecosystem service to us is pollination. So that is necessary for plant reproduction, right? We have to have pollination in order for our plants to reproduce. But most of that, what we care about is our food, right? If we don't have pollination, we don't have fruits and vegetables. Well, we don't have fruits, but a lot of our food is fruits. We don't have, watermelons and grapes and blueberries. We don't have chocolate and coffee, all the things that come from our plants. We need pollination to make that happen and happy. But but our insect populations are declining, right? You've probably heard about the global or insect apocalypse. I know that sounds scary, and it is scary. This is real stuff. Our insect populations are declining because they're losing habitat. Just like I mentioned before, if we keep taking away the places where they can find the nutrients, the food, the habitat that they need, then they aren't going to survive. So as we continue to develop our state to accommodate for all of this growth, and that growth isn't going to stop, right? We can't just shut it down and say no more. It's going to keep happening. So we need to start looking at non-traditional spaces as opportunities to restore that habitat that we've taken away. And this includes things like using native plants in your landscapes. Very easy to do. Replace some of those non-natives and invasives with native plants. But what about roadsides? We don't really think about roadsides as habitat generally, but they can actually play a significant role in the conservation of these declining insect populations, among other benefits, which we'll talk about. So we have over 250,000 miles of roads just here in Florida, and they extend through all of our landscapes. If you think about a map of Florida and where all the roads go, we have roads on our coast, we have them going through our forests, we have them in our wetlands, we have them through all of our built environment. So they extend through all of our landscapes. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Project Remote. This is an organization that calculates the most remote areas in every state. So how far can you be in any state from a road? Think about that, right? How far can you get or what's the furthest away from a road you can be? And here in Florida, that's just 17 miles. And that's in the Everglades. So, the Everglades is like our biggest natural area, our biggest area that hasn't been completely chopped up into tiny isolated areas. So even in the Everglades, you can only be no more than 17 miles away from a road. And again, this isn't going to change, right? But the good news is that the ecological health, safety, and transportation that we rely on roads, they're not mutually exclusive. We can have both all. Roadsides that are rich with a diversity of native plants, of flowering plants, can support pollinators more so than that mowed down non-native grass that is so common on our roadsides. So there's a lot of research out there that supports this conversation that we're having here today, that shows how roadsides can be great habitat for insects. This one that I'm referencing here is from the Xerces Society, which is an international scientific nonprofit dedicated to studying insects and understanding, how we interact with them, how we can make the world better for them. And what they found is that bee abundance is bee abundance is twice as high on roadsides that have those native flowering plants compared to our typical roadside that has non-native grasses primarily, and that we mow. So we can adapt management strategies to make these roads more valuable to pollinators. Excuse me. Roadsides that are restored or managed for native vegetation will then provide nectar and pollen and serve as larval hosts. We don't just need to feed them, we need to feed their caterpillars, their babies. We need to make sure that the entire life cycle of our pollinators is supported, and we can do that on roadsides. And if you think about all the roads that exist, if we start looking at them not just as thoroughfares for us, but a network of potential habitat for pollinators, like think of the impact that we can have. Just like, we use roads to get from point A to point B. And along the way, we might stop for something to drink, something to eat. Maybe we stay overnight. We just need to use the facilities. This is the same thing that our pollinators do, right? They want to go from natural area to natural area, but they need to have all those amenities along the way. So this is what we can do. Roadsides can serve as pathways for pollinators, for other wildlife, and help them move safely between those disparate, disconnected, shrinking natural areas. And they act as corridors to restore that connectivity and reduce the risk of isolation and localized extinction. So I won't get into all that too much, but the smaller that our natural areas become, the more at risk those populations are in there. They don't have the genetic diversity, they don't have the availability of resources, and so they are at a higher risk of local extinction when we have these shrinking areas. So studies show that insects that have that connectivity, that are able to move about and find what they need, are going to have greater genetic diversity and greater population densities, which is what we want. Roadsides also present a really unique opportunity for wildflowers in particular. Most of our roadsides are sunny, open, disturbed environments, which is really an ideal condition for a lot of our native wildflowers. You might not think about that. If you're a gardener and you're dealing with a lot of our annuals and non-native species, you're spending a lot of care and there's a lot of resources involved. But a lot of our native wildflowers really just like to be left alone. They don't need constant attention, fertilizers. They can handle the harsh environment, the dry soils. That's what they're acclimated to. So our roadsides are really good for a lot of these species. And even our wet ditches and our swales that are on roadsides also provide good opportunities for a lot of our aquatic wildflowers and grasses to thrive. A lot of our ecosystems here in Florida too are fire adapted. Many of our species need that open canopy that fire creates in order to survive. Roadsides typically don't have tree canopy, but they do need to be maintained. We're not going to put fire on our roads. That's not what I'm talking about. But disturbances like fire, you can mimic some of the benefits by mowing. So I know I just said we don't, you're going to hear me say we don't need to mow much, but we can do some of that. Mowing will help recreate some of those natural things. And I don't want to give the idea that mowing is a replacement for fire. It absolutely is not, but it does help a little bit. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And of course, we do see fire suppression a lot. The more that we create these built environments, the less we want fire. We don't want fire running up against our housing developments. And so roadsides offer an opportunity for some of those more critical or endangered species, species that aren't getting what they need in the natural environment because, again, we're kind of taking that out. Our roadsides can become a refugia for some of these threatened species. So what you see here are a few, that's Harper's Beauty, which is an endangered species that occurs in a very isolated area of the Panhandle. Its habitat has been largely eliminated by development, but it has a fairly thriving, relatively speaking, it's very small, but a thriving population on a roadside or on roadsides in the Panhandle. Our white-top pitcher plants, too, are another one that we do see, excuse me, along some of our roadsides. And here you can kind of make it out, but that is one of our native milkweed species on the right. This is a species that loves high, dry, sunny environment. What else is that environment good for? Houses and schools, and that's where we want to live, right? So this is a larval host for the monarch, queen, and soldier butterfly. It is a very reliable nectar source for many other pollinators, and it's critically important, but also at risk. But here you see we're finding populations along roadsides, and even the mowing and all the things that we're going to talk about with regard to management, done effectively, can still allow these populations to thrive in other areas where they're going to be eliminated. So the best way to maintain naturally occurring roadside wildflowers is simply to reduce the amount of mowing. Mowing isn't inherently bad, but you have to time it properly and be very selective in how it is approached in order to maximize those ecological benefits. So if we time it properly, we're allowing our wildflowers to go to flower, right? We're not mowing them down as they're trying to produce the flowers. We're letting them flower so that they're available as a resource for our pollinators, and we're letting them go to seed so that they can reproduce. Then we can come in and mow. Doesn't mean we can't mow at all. I understand, there's also we have a webinar coming up next month from a sociologist, or she's a sociology professor, but has done some research on the perceptions of roadsides. So that's a whole other thing of people's perception of what beauty is, what order is. So I encourage you to check out our website and sign up. It's a free webinar next month. We also have recordings so you can view it later, but that's a whole other topic that I won't get into. But that is part of it, right? That's part of the mowing regime too, is because people need this sense of order. We need to kind of look at things differently because we need to allow for this, ecological, the best conditions, right? So we need to let these wildflowers go. Let them go through their flowering season, their seeding season, to ensure that we have new ones coming back. We need those seeds to be dispersed. If we cut it down while it's flowering, while it's seeding, we're reducing its ability to provide food for pollinators, and we're reducing its ability to come back and to provide more in another season. Excuse me. So this is just a diagram of a typical roadside. So like I said, it's simply, so first of all, mowing has two goals, right? There's driver visibility, and there's a safety issue of allowing cars to pull over. So not every roadside is ideal for what I'm talking about. If the roadside has no shoulder, or doesn't have enough width of land, then we're not even talking about that. Many of our roadsides just don't do that. But when we have a roadside that has the shoulder space, so we have the room for people to pull over safely, then we have an opportunity to look at it differently. There's no need to mow the entire portion. So a lot of times on our roadsides that have these large shoulders, you'll see it mow all the way back to the edge, whatever the property line is. That's not necessary. As long as we have that safety strip, that's all we need to mow. That's the only requirement that DOT has, and that's all that's really needed from a safety perspective. The width of that safety strip varies. So depending on the speed of the road, the amount of traffic, the number of lanes, on a 6-lane interstate, you're going to need a much bigger safety strip than on a nice little country or county road, because people are going much faster, a lot more traffic is coming through, you know, they have to kind of balance both of those. But it's usually about 10 feet. It can be as little, excuse me, it can be as little as 5 feet. So again, it just depends on the road. But mowing can improve the diversity of the roadside habitats, right? So we can mow it, just timing it properly. Generally, it's about twice a year. And if you look at most of our roads and pay attention to the mowing cycle, you will see that it's happening a lot more frequently, right? Most of our roads are mowed. When you go, no matter when you're traveling on, like our county roads, our state roads, you'll see them mowed. It's just kind of part of our DNA. But we don't have to do that. And that's something that we work with. We work with counties, we work with the DOT to try and cut that back. And we'll talk about the benefits of that too. But mowing once, late autumn through early winter, again, after most have flowered and set seed, is a really good time. Pollinators are less active at that time too. And then some other counties will like to do a second mow, so we do also talk about mowing in the summertime. That kind of mimics that lightning or fire season. Remember I mentioned that mowing can mimic some of those benefits too. So, but that's really all you need. Twice a year is all we need to, as again, I'm not talking about the safety strip. That mowing all the time, we have to. That's a rule, and it's there for a good reason. But all of that additional space can be left. And even a reduction, so we're suggesting twice a year, but even a reduction from every 3 weeks to every 6 weeks can have a significant impact. We've seen that. We've been studying this for a long time. Even just reducing it by half, if the powers that be are not interested in going down to a twice a year cycle. So there are many economic benefits to doing this too. And when I talk about this, you have to, people come to decisions for many different reasons, right? Some people are interested in beautification. How do I get my roadside to be prettier? I want to see flowers. Some are concerned about pollinators, ecological health. When you're talking to counties and public works, this is the thing that gets their attention, right? How do we save money? Well, we can do that too. So if they're not the bleeding heart tree hugger like I am, like save all the flowers, please, we can look at it from an economic perspective and say, hey, this is going to save money. So we did a study with DOT called the Economic and Ecological Benefits of Roadside Native Wildflower Plantings, because DOT does a lot of planting. And I'm not talking about plantings today. I'm talking about naturally occurring. But the benefits are the same, right? If we have wildflowers blooming on roadsides, the benefits are the same. So in this report that we did, we concluded that sustainable management practices, i.e. reduced mowing, can save 30% in management costs. And that's a lot. You're talking about tax money. We're paying for this essentially, right? We can save 30% just by reducing mowing. So in Santa Rosa County, and I don't know if you can see much of that, but Santa Rosa County is kind of our first embracer of this process. And we have a very committed volunteer there who's done a lot of work to work with Public Works, with the county. But they sent us this letter. This was in 2020. They implemented a reduced mowing program. And what they found is that they saved $1,000 per mile per year just in reduced mowing. So they have 70 miles in their roadside program. That was $210,000 just in the first 3 years. That's a huge savings when you talk about the cost of maintaining roadsides. So they sent this lovely letter to our volunteer acknowledging and thanking. But since then, she's continued to work in this county, and they've added even more roadsides to the program. So that savings is just going to continue to grow. And it's not just the savings from reduced mowing. The study that we did also showed that the same practices along the state highway system provided about $1 billion in ecosystem services. So remember I mentioned pollinators can do things like beneficial insects and nutrient recycling. Our plants also have jobs to do. They control erosion, they are carbon sequesters, they do a lot of things as well. So Those things are services that some of them aren't tangible, some of them are harder to quantify, but the Department of Transportation provided that feedback to us, that $1 billion in ecosystem services. Hard to argue with that. So we can save money that way, but we can also generate money with wildflowers too. And these shots are from, that's Tallahassee, this is the Panhandle. They are kind of our poster children. That area of the state has a lot more opportunity because there's more natural areas, there's more rural roads. So when we also have an incredible diversity up in the Apalachicola National Forest. Doesn't mean we can't have that everywhere else, but it's a really good kind of poster child for this program because there's just so much diversity and opportunity up there. But people, you know, when you have these beautiful, colorful displays, that draws people in. People want to come and see them, or see, especially on roadsides where we have those threatened or endangered species. People come from all over just to experience that, to photograph it. They want to see these. You know, think about Texas and even North Carolina. A lot of the states that have these huge roadside wildflower programs, that is a destination part of the year for tourists, right? So you're bringing people in and coming in to photograph, to do whatever. I'm one of those people. I go to the Panhandle every year because I know I'm going to see stuff that I don't get to see here, and I'm going to see it. You know, just it's amazing. So we can attract tourists, and then they come in to look at the flora and fauna, but then they're going to stay here. They're going to stay in your hotels. They're going to eat at your restaurants. They're going to shop at your local stores. So there is an opportunity to attract people and bring an economic aspect to the roadside program. And of course, there's the agricultural benefit as well. Crop pollinators are responsible for about every third bite of food that we eat. So that means protecting pollinator populations is essential to our food security. And we're an ag state. We have a lot of agriculture here. And that agriculture provides food for pollinators, but it doesn't provide everything that they need. We need those pollinators to come in and pollinate those food crops, but we need to make sure that they have all the other stuff that's going to keep them here and attract them so that we keep having, they keep doing their job. Pollinator-dependent crops like fruits and vegetables and nuts make up a really critical part of our diet. It's estimated that native bees in the United States contribute about $3 billion in pollination services for our agricultural crops. So they're really important. We wouldn't have the industry and we wouldn't have our own sources of food, if you will, without that. Our plates would look really different if we didn't have pollinators. I'm a vegan. I would really suffer if I didn't have pollinators because that's the entirety of my diet. So roadside wildflowers can be a really consistent source of food for our crop pollinators, supplying them with that habitat, with the extra nourishment that they need to ensure that, again, they're doing their job. We need them to do their job. Excuse me. And then, of course, there's other environmental benefits. I mentioned before the ecosystem services that our wildflowers provide. If we mow less, we're also reducing our consumption of gas, fossil fuels. We're reducing the emissions that those mowers are putting out on the road every time they mow. And then we're getting those services back, that carbon sequestration that help mitigating climate change, absorbing that runoff that's coming off the cars. You know, there's a lot of things that our wildflowers can do, our native plants can do. So again, no matter how you approach it, right? Some people need beauty. We've got that. Some people want to support pollinators. We can do that. Help the environment, save money, generate revenue, all of these things. No matter what thing is going to get you or get your local people excited, there's an opportunity here. So I'll talk about a couple little wildflowers that you'll see on the roadside. It depends on where you are in the state, what time of year, obviously. But these are some of the common ones that you'll see. Our tickseed, our coreopsis. It's a couple different species that you'll find. This is a pretty persistent wildflower. It's actually one of the ones that DOT plants too. So not only do you see it in naturally occurring areas, but especially this one's a planted photo, but if you see it in this like crazy mass like we see on the turnpike, that's actually planted by DOT. They do like superseding, and again, they're trying to make it, it's not just like their interest is more tourism based, right? They want to have a little showpiece when people are driving on the turnpike. So that's why they do a lot of the seeding that they do. But again, this can be a naturally occurring thing as well. This is fleabane, another one that you'll see commonly. It's an early spring one, so we're kind of seeing that one right now. It'll go till early summer and supports a lot of different pollinators as well. Black-eyed Susan, another one that's commonly planted by DOT, but also occurring naturally as well. This one has a really long bloom span, so you'll see that generally from spring through fall. Our grasses, we do have some native grasses that do great on roadsides. Most of our roadsides are planted with Bahia or Bermuda grass. These are not native. They don't provide exactly what our pollinators need, but we have a lot of grasses that generally thrive on roadsides that we can consider in our maintenance plans. Goldenrod, you see this more on coastal roads, but it's another one that we see commonly on our roadsides as well, mostly in late summer and fall. Flowerleaf sage, this one's popping right now. This is our late winter into early spring wildflower. Great one. We've done a study on this and another species as an alternative to Bahia grass because it responds so well to mowing. It has a persistent basal rosette, so you can come in with a mower and cut it down, and it doesn't do anything to the plant itself. It just like knocks off that spent flower stalk. So, you know what? Why roadside wildflowers matter, right? But what do we do? So how are we helping with this? I can talk all day about how amazing it is, but we have to make this work, right? So we primarily work with county and public works. We do work with DOT. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about DOT because as a state agency, there's a lot more red tape, hoops, whatever, to go through. We have a long-standing relationship with them, but we don't work in planting. We don't do the seeding. A lot of the seeding that they do is also not native, so we're working on that. We've got a whole seed initiative that we're working on trying to ensure that there's native seed for them, but again, that's another talk. Where we are most successful is working at the county level and with the public works departments because they have a lot more control locally and a lot more opportunity to do the kind of management that we're talking about. So we go in and help identify roadsides that are potentially good candidates for the program, for being a roadside wildflower site. We have experts come out and do seasonal surveys. So we'll go out to a roadside 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall, and do kind of a bio blitz, identify as much as we can so that we know what's thriving there, what lives there, what can we expect, and that will help us then, that kind of comprehensive inventory can help us give guidance on when it's best to mow. We have volunteers in our counties too that work with us, so they'll either continually do surveys. These seasonal ones that we do are kind of to get that baseline so that we get that big full inventory. But then we still want people to help throughout the year to identify things that we didn't see or help in other ways. And I'll get to that when I talk about what you can do. So once we have that inventory, once we know what to expect and what's thriving there, then we can go in and make recommendations for management. We can talk with Public Works and with the counties or the cities in some cases and say, hey, this is your best season, or this is when it's ideal for you to mow. We can write the management guides and the SOPs to help them understand the best thing for them to do, and we can go in and update those plans as needed. What we can't do is enforce this. So I have to make that clear, right? We have the ability to write it, to advise, to tell you all the things that you need, not you, but them to do. We don't have the ability to implement management plans or the authority to enforce them. We can only provide the guidance and hope that, you know, if the county's already working with us, there's an interest, so we hope that they do what we suggest that they do. Once a roadside is designated as a wildflower area, we can put signs in place. So with the state, they have their, I don't have it up here. The state has its own wildflower area sign that you've probably seen along our state roads. But cities and counties can do this too. A lot of them like to just come up with their own designs. Whatever it is, it signals to passersby and to contractors, mowers, people that are working on the roadsides that, hey, there's something going on here, even if it doesn't look like it. Those signs are really important because there are times in the year when the flowers aren't blooming, or once it's been mowed and people get, a little confused, right? If we don't have something that's saying, hey, this is an area of importance, there's something happening here. So those are services that we provide to the state, to counties, to cities, to utility companies, other roadside vegetation managers, but we can't do it all alone. We need volunteers. So one thing that volunteers can do is help identify wildflower areas. We want to get as many roadsides in the program as possible because that offers a level of protection, right? And this is what we're trying to do. Going back to the beginning of this talk, we are trying to create corridors of habitat that connect our natural areas. So we need to get as many roadsides in this program as possible to have more habitat, to get as much habitat as possible. So we're looking for roads that host naturally occurring wildflowers. And a good place to start is roads that run through or adjacent to conservation areas. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? If there's natural area around the road is a perfect candidate for being a roadside wildflower site. But it doesn't mean it has to be that. We can look at other county roads and roads in rural areas. Just because it's not in a natural area doesn't mean it can't be suitable. So you do want to look for roads that have limited driveways and business entrances. The presence of driveways and businesses can increase that want for a more orderly look, a more orderly looking landscape, and that's not what we're talking about. With these roadside wildflower stands, we want them wild and natural. So in a more urbanized area or any area where you have a lot of businesses and driveways, people are looking for something that looks a little bit more intentional, ornamental perhaps. So it's not necessarily ideal for a wildflower roadside. But we do want to encourage, businesses and homeowners to use native plants. We do talk about that a lot as well. We can help with that, but that's not part of the program that we're talking about. So those higher density sites are not necessarily the best opportunity for this program. And the road also needs to have that right of way. Remember, we talked about this, the safety strip. We need to have at least 5 to 6 feet of usable habitat. So after the safety strip, the mowed area, that ditch swale or back slope or whatever that existing rest of the land is, needs to be at least 5 or 6 feet. If it's not that big, it's not a good candidate because a 2-foot strip of habitat, I'm not saying that's not useful, but it's not what we're looking for in terms of preserving the roadside. And a narrow right-of-way just won't have enough room beyond that safety strip to really be good for habitat. So, and then finally, minimal or invasive pressure is really important. Doesn't mean, again, that if there's a roadside that has invasive species, can't be managed, but it's going to take a lot more to get it to a state where it then can become viable habitat. Because first we have to go in and remove all of the invasives, treat for them. That's pretty intensive disruption to the landscape, and then we're talking about either waiting a long time for natural recovery or actually going in and planting. So again, not that you can't do it there, but we're looking for easy wins, and there are a lot of opportunities for easy wins if we just find those places that can just be reduced mowed. Something else that volunteers can do is become a wildflower watcher. We have a lot of volunteers that go out and survey roadsides. We rely on volunteers to conduct those ongoing surveillance once we get a road into the program. So checking for compliance with management plans. If you've been involved in helping to establish a wildflower area, keep an eye on it. If you see it being mowed at the wrong time of year, you can let us know. We can then contact the whoever's in charge of mowing find out what happened. Sometimes there's a disconnect in communication. You know, we're dealing with the county, for example, who hires a company that hires a contractor that hires a guy on a mower, or gal, someone. So there's a lot of, you know, opportunity for miscommunication and for things to not go as planned. So if we have people who are paying attention to these areas, they can let us know, and then we can have that communication. We can't, unfortunately, bring it back if it's been mowed down, but we can understand why it happened and make sure, or do our best to make sure it doesn't happen again. Wildflower watchers can also look for those invasives. If we've got a road in the program and we start seeing invasive pressure, we might be able to catch that, manage for it so that it doesn't have a huge implication on the roadside. Tracking of those endangered species. We've identified endangered or threatened species on a roadside. It's good to pay attention to that. And then also just reporting signage. You'd be amazed at people like to steal roadside signs. And wildflower area ones are really popular, I think, because they're usually pretty. They have flowers on them. But we need people to report that. If we have a wildflower area and the sign is gone, that's a problem for contractors on the mowers. It's a problem for, you know, general public understanding that this is a wildfire area. So volunteers are really invaluable to this program and keeping it going. So we do have a form on our website. You can report all kinds of information to us. It doesn't obligate you to do anything. Even if you just say, I see a road, there's some cool wildflowers on it, go check it out. And we never hear from you again. That's still a benefit. Now, what we'd love is to keep you engaged and have you involved in whatever it is we can do on that roadside. But by filling out this form, it does not, you're not indebted to having to work with us. But you can report potential areas that you think are good for the program. You can report compliance issues. If you see a wildflower area and you see that it's been mowed, especially during a flowering season, just let us know. There might be a reason. It might not be anything that we're involved in, but we can look into that and find out what's going on. The more information you can provide, the better. So if you have GPS coordinates of whatever you're telling us about, that's great. If you don't have it, that's okay too. If it's Highway 50 between this street and that you know, tree or whatever information you can give to us is helpful. Pictures are great, identifying species, but a lot of people don't know that, or we don't want anyone to jeopardize their safety either by trying to get us a photo. So don't think that you need to pull off on a fast-moving, busy state road and risk your own safety just to get a photo. We can figure that out. So whatever information you have is helpful. Another way that people can help is by helping us get resolutions, wildflower resolutions adopted or updated in our counties and cities. So all the green counties that you see here have adopted a wildflower resolution. And what that means is that the county has said, we are interested in the value of wildflowers and we want to work to preserve them or to encourage them or whatever it might be. So that means management practices. This gives us a really good opportunity to work with DOT. DOT recognizes this resolution as an interest, and it says, okay, this county has said we want a wildfire program. Now DOT has an avenue to go in and potentially make changes. You don't have to have a resolution in order to be involved in this or have roadsides in this program, but it is a really good tool. Orange County does not have one. We did just get a call in the last 2 weeks from a local volunteer who wants to see a resolution, so I'm hoping that that will happen. We have step-by-step process on our website. We have a start-to-finish how-to guide to get a resolution adopted. We can help you. We can hold your hand through the process. We can be there to support it, but we can't do it ourselves, because the last thing a county wants is for some state nonprofit to go, hey, I don't live here, I don't work here, but this is what you should do. So if there's no local support, why are they going to listen to us? Now, we can talk to them about the benefits and all the things I've talked to you about today, but if there's no local support, no local interest, they're less likely to take it as seriously or maybe give as much emphasis to it as we would like. So it really helps to have local people, especially If you're talking about getting a county resolution passed, or even at the city level, you're talking about talking to your commissioners and the people that are your elected officials. They want to hear from their constituents, not me. Well, I do live in Orange County, but generally I'm not going to go into the panhandle and tell them what they should do in their county when I don't seemingly have any skin in the game. So it really helps to have local support to make sure that that this process is handled correctly. We do have a full-time roadside coordinator who can, again, assist with everything. So we have a person whose job it is to manage all of these programs and help get these things passed. So you have help. It's not as big and scary as it sounds. It can be a bit political sometimes, but it's wildflowers. It's not a controversial thing to go to your county commissioner and talk about. They may not be interested, okay, but this isn't divisive. This is, there's lots of different ways to approach it. So there's an avenue. And again, it's the green counties. We've got, I think, 37 counties have adopted them, and then we've got 4 cities as well who have also adopted resolutions. But some of these resolutions were adopted 10 years ago. So we need volunteers to come in and help update those as well. A lot of the commissioners who've passed them are no longer in power or in office. So, again, volunteers, you guys know here at Mead, volunteers are everything. So roadsides are not wild lands, right? We're not talking about conservation lands. We're just not talking about wild habitat. They can't take the place of true land conservation. But if we manage them correctly, they do have a really important role in conservation. So I'd encourage you all to get involved. If you want to help here in Orange County, like I said, we've got to start, but we'll need some help. But we have lots of tools on our website, again, to help with that, and we are here to answer questions. Separate from the roadside program, we also have just lots of other amazing resources on our website that talk about native plants. We want people to plant more in their landscapes, so here's all the guides you need to get you started. Everything is on our website and free. We do our monthly webinar series. If you are interested in what I talked about today, definitely check it out. Next month, it's Dr. Laura Warner from UF talking about those public perceptions of roadsides, and it's really fascinating. So that's all I got. I'm happy to answer questions, but otherwise, thank you all for coming and listening. That's a good question. I wish I had a good answer for you because to me it's very easy, right? Like save money, say all the things I talked about. It seems very convincing. I know working with DOT, so DOT is a state agency, but they have districts, they have regional people. So we've worked at the local level with DOT, and what we've learned is that, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, this is true for a lot of counties as well, but the contracts that they have, I don't fully understand it, so I'm not going to do it justice by speaking about it, but they actually, the way a lot of contracts are set up right now with management, they will lose money if they don't mow more. And I can't give you anything else that's going to make that make sense because it doesn't make sense to me. But that's what we get a lot of pushback on, is that we can't. We have to, we've got this contract and this is how it's set up, and it requires this many mows a year, and if we don't do it, we will lose money. That's one convoluted but obstacle. The other part of that, or another part of that, is public perception. So people associate wild with unsafe. So having, that safety strip mode, and again, even beyond, makes people feel safer. They can see. We get a lot of questions like, well, I won't see the deer coming out of the road. Well, it's not like that. Our vegetation, we're not talking about thick forests up to the edge of the road. We're talking about grasses and wildflowers that are a few feet tall. You're not going to not see, any more so than you're not going to see it coming when it is mowed, because if an animal is that fast and darts out, that happens on mowed roadsides too. So it's a perception thing where people feel safer with order, they feel safer with mowing, and so that's why the work that Dr. Warner's doing that is in our webinar next month is really crucial, of understanding how do we not combat these public perceptions, but how do we work with them? How do we change them? How do we get people to understand that this isn't a risk to your safety? And the idea of like changing people's like beauty or aesthetics, that's a whole different part of this that we struggle with in all the work we do, because that's the issue with native plants versus these manicured landscapes. And people have ideas on what beauty is, and I don't know how we beat that. It's subjective, right? But it is a part of the roadside conversation, and all it takes is, so it takes a lot of people to go to the county and get them to do it differently. It takes one person to undo all of that by calling and saying, my road looks bad. I drive down this road and it looks bad. It feels unsafe. It's whatever. Because, sorry, I'm kind of going on this too, but these are elected officials in many cases who want to make sure that they don't have angry constituents. And if you've got one person saying this is bad, that's a PR problem for them, right? So it's easier to just go mow the road. This will make someone happy. Or I don't know. I'm oversimplifying it, but I think I'm making my point of what the issues can be. So it's a challenge just to get people to, that's why I do these talks, to get people to understand there's so many opportunities with roadside. Whatever your approach is, there's just so many different ways that we can look at it where it's valuable, that I'm hoping will change people's ideas of, but I need it to be mowed because that feels safer or prettier or whatever. Did that help? But most of the time, we're looking for volunteers or for representatives to come to us, because we're not here to bully people into, and I'm saying that loosely, but step in and say this is what you need to do, because that tends to foster resistance, right? We need them to be already open to it. And giving talks like this helps, especially when I have people in my audience who are in a situation that they can help when they're working for counties or cities or whatever. But we do. Well, thank you. I'm going to keep you around because you're really good for my ego here. But you'd be surprised, because some places, they've already got their idea of how it needs to be. We do this. This is how we've always done it. We mow this frequently. It's needed because of A, B, or C. And so to come in unsolicited and say, you need to do it differently, isn't always welcome. But we are always here to help. And again, it's not like we won't approach a city or a county if we think there's a good opportunity. But we also have enough interest where we're getting, counties are coming to us, cities are coming to us. We just finished surveys in Citrus County, in Alachua, in Suwannee. We've got a local interest in Hillsborough to establish a roadside program. We just did a program with Pinellas. So we do have interest. We're busy enough that we don't have to go out looking for it, but we are very interested in working with any entity that wants to be involved.
You also offer grants that people apply to help with pollinators gardens.
We do offer grants, yeah, not necessarily for roadsides, although we did do a grant with Groveland's a really unique situation. Lake County is amazing. They are all about sustainability and green infrastructure, and they're a great model to look at. But Groveland in particular has really embraced this, and we've done a few programs with them. They actually got the permission from DOT to manage State Road 50. So generally, the state manages a state road, even if it's in your community. But if you go through the right process, you can take that over. And Groveland did that, and so we did give them a grant to do kind of a pilot of native planting and seeding in a median strip in Claremont. And we're learning, Groveland. And we're learning a lot from that, because it's a really harsh environment and it didn't turn out exactly as we wanted. But yes, we did have a grant for that. But we do regular grants for community gardens. We have a library program, Winter Park Library. I'll put Heather on the spot, but Heather's our local IFAS agent, Master Garden. Well, But she got a grant for the Winter Park Library, so she's installed a native plant garden there that we helped fund. So yes, we do have quite a few grant programs that support native planting. Yes, and then